Have you ever wondered how quickly time can change the way we treat those who once gave us everything? What happens when the kindness and love we receive from family go unnoticed as we grow older? In this video, I'm sharing a powerful story that highlights the importance of gratitude, generosity, and family bonds. It's a reminder that sometimes the people who treat us the best, who show us unconditional love, can end up feeling forgotten as life moves forward. You'll discover the real-life story of Aunt Ba, a woman who opened her heart and home to her relatives, always giving, never expecting anything in return. From helping with wedding dowries to providing food, shelter, and endless support, Aunt Ba was always there. But what happens when the next generation grows up and forgets those acts of kindness? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll learn more than just a heartwarming family story. You'll understand why it's important to appreciate those who truly care for us, how to cultivate lasting bonds with your loved ones, and why gratitude matters more than we think. Don't miss out on these valuable lessons. Keep watching. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. I want to offer a piece of advice that, although difficult to accept, carries profound truth. Sometimes, it's important not to be too kind to your relatives' children. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that you become cold, indifferent, or devoid of compassion. That is far from my point. What I mean is, don't pour excessive kindness or unbridled generosity into them, especially when it isn't fully appreciated or reciprocated. It's not that these children don't deserve kindness, they do. But the dynamics of family relationships can be complex, and often, these relationships are fleeting, shallow, or misunderstood. There are many times when familial bonds, no matter how deep they might seem, lack the understanding and emotional investment we hope for. And this realization, while hard to come to terms with, is often made clearer as time passes. I've seen this firsthand in my own family, and it still stings when I think about it. My grandmother, a woman full of warmth and love, treated our generation with immense care and affection, probably more than we deserved at the time. I can still vividly remember how she would open her home to us, often letting 5 or 6 of us stay at her house for days, weeks, or even years. She welcomed us with open arms, fed us, clothed us, and took care of us as if we were her children. Her home was a sanctuary where we felt safe, loved, and cherished. She never scolded us, never showed favoritism. Her love was unconditional. At the time, I could never have imagined that one day, her sacrifices and selfless care would be forgotten. But now, looking back, it's painful to acknowledge that as my grandmother enters her 60s, fewer and fewer of us remember her kindness. The people she loved and poured her heart into, the children she took in and cared for, have gradually drifted away. Life moves on, and memories fade, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of loneliness and abandonment. Only a handful of us continue to visit her, and even fewer reach out just to check in. It breaks my heart to think of how, despite her boundless love, she is now left in the shadows, her kindness largely unrecognized and unreturned. I know it isn't anyone's fault, and certainly not hers. It's just how things unfold in life. No matter how much you give, it doesn't always come back in the way you hope. This brings me to my father's family. My father has 3 siblings, Uncle, Aunt Hai, and Aunt Ba. Each of them has walked a different path in life, shaped by their circumstances and decisions. Of them all, Aunt Ba stands out as the most successful. She was always a bright student, even in the most difficult of times. While the rest of us were struggling to make ends meet, Aunt Ba excelled in her studies. She finished high school with distinction and continued her education at a vocational college. After completing her studies, she landed a job at a state-owned enterprise, a rare achievement in those days. She married a man from the town, and together, they moved to the city in the early 1990s. Aunt Ba's life became a symbol of success. She had a motorbike, a refrigerator, and a television, luxuries that were rare and highly coveted in rural areas back then. Her family lived a life most of us could only dream of. Meanwhile, my father, uncle, and Aunt Hai led simpler lives. They didn't have the same opportunities that Aunt Ba had. Education wasn't emphasized for them, and they stayed in the countryside, working the land to support their families. Uncle only completed elementary school before returning to the village to farm, while Aunt Hai graduated from junior high school and spent her days working on the farm. She married a man from a neighboring village whose family was just as ordinary as ours. Neither side was wealthy. It was a humble, hard-working life, far removed from the comforts Aunt Ba had attained. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. My father's life, however, was a little bit better than his siblings. After completing junior high, he worked in the fields for a few years before marrying my mother. Together, they moved to the town in search of a better future. My mother worked tirelessly selling tofu, while my father opened a bicycle repair shop. Their life wasn't easy, but it was better compared to Uncle and Aunt Hai's. Yet, despite their relative success, my parents never forgot their roots, and they always remembered the kindness and generosity extended to them, especially by Aunt Ba. Aunt Ba never let her success make her look down on her family. She was the opposite. She remained humble, always ready to lend a helping hand. Over 30 years ago, when my father was about to marry my mother, things didn't go as planned. My family was poor, and we couldn't afford the wedding dowry that was required for such an event. My paternal grandparents didn't approve of the marriage, even though my mother was already pregnant with me. They saw it as a burden, and the lack of a proper dowry was a significant obstacle. It was Aunt Ba who, without hesitation, stepped in to help. She quietly gave my father 1 million dong, an amount that was a small fortune at the time. She didn't ask for repayment, didn't make any demands, and didn't expect anything in return. Her simple act of kindness allowed my parents to marry, and it was because of her that I was born. That one moment, that one gesture, has stayed with me all these years. Aunt Ba's selflessness and generosity were extraordinary, and it's something I'll never forget. But even as I reflect on that moment, I can't help but feel a sense of sadness and loss. Despite her incredible generosity, her kindness wasn't always reciprocated in the way it should have been. She was the one who gave so much of herself, but when it came time for others to give back, only a few remembered her. And that, to me, is the ultimate lesson of life. Love, kindness, and sacrifice are powerful, but they can often be unappreciated and forgotten. No matter how much you invest in others, the return isn't always guaranteed. When my family first moved to the town to start a new life, we felt overwhelmed and uncertain, but one person stood out as a constant beacon of support and kindness: Aunt Ba. From the very beginning, she was there for us, helping us in ways that I can only now fully appreciate. My father, filled with ambition, decided to open a small bicycle repair shop, hoping to make a living and provide for the family. But like any new business, it came with its challenges, especially financial ones. That's when Aunt Ba stepped in, offering us a lifeline that we desperately needed. She gave my father 1 million dong, an amount that, at the time, seemed like a fortune. This wasn't just a financial gesture, it was a gift of hope, a starting point from which my father could build his business and begin to support the family. I'll never forget the warmth and love behind that 1 million dong, which was the very foundation of my father's success. Aunt Ba's generosity was not limited to just this one moment, though. She was always there for us in every way, especially during the holidays. It didn't matter if we saw her in person or not. Aunt Ba made sure that we received her blessings every year. Every holiday season, she would send us lucky money, a tradition that meant so much more than just receiving money. It was a symbol of her love, her constant care for us, and her desire for our happiness and well-being. The amount of lucky money she gave us grew with each passing year, not because she had to, but because she wanted to share her good fortune with her family. Every year, we would eagerly wait for the envelope, not just for the money, but for the warmth and affection that came with it. It was something we all looked forward to, a beautiful reminder of her kindness and the deep bond we shared. But Aunt Ba's generosity extended beyond just our immediate family. She didn't only help us, she reached out to Uncle and Aunt Hai as well, offering them support in both big and small ways. She didn't differentiate between anyone. She gave freely and unconditionally, always offering a helping hand when needed. There was never a question of whether or not she would help. Aunt Ba simply did, because that was who she was. And it wasn't just money that she offered, it was her time, her energy, and her love. She was the pillar of our extended family, the one we could always count on, no matter what. In every way, Aunt Ba treated us like her own children, giving us the care and support we needed to thrive. One of the most significant ways she helped us was with our education. The local schools in our village were underfunded and lacked proper resources, which meant that for many of us, the only way to get a good education was to travel to the district, where the schools were better equipped. My cousins and I, like many others in the village, decided to attend school in the district. We would leave our village to study junior high and high school, knowing that this was our only shot at a better future. The journey was long and difficult. We had to stay in boarding schools, but every weekend, we would travel home, a journey that took over 60 kilometers by bus, which was no small feat, especially when buses were often unreliable. The ride was long and exhausting, and sometimes if we missed the bus, we wouldn't be able to return home at all. But through it all, Aunt Ba's house became our haven. She and her husband welcomed us with open arms, even before we had the chance to ask. Her home was always a place of comfort, warmth, and peace, especially after the long and tiring journey. It wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary where we could rest and recharge for the week ahead. The house itself was large, a beautiful 3-story building that always felt welcoming. The first floor was a shop, where Aunt Ba and her husband worked, but the second and third floors were filled with cozy bedrooms. There were 6 bedrooms in total, each one a refuge where we could find peace. Although Aunt Ba had only one daughter, and my grandparents lived with my wealthier uncle, there was always room for us. It didn't matter if 5 or 6 cousins stayed at different times. There was always more than enough space, and more importantly, there was always more than enough love. Aunt Ba's house was the gathering place for many of my cousins, especially those from Uncle's side of the family. My cousin stayed with Aunt Ba for 6 years while studying junior high and high school, and his sister stayed for 5 years while attending junior high and vocational school. Then, 2 more cousins from Aunt Hai's side came to stay, one for 3 years during high school, and the other for 4.5 years while attending junior high and vocational school. It seemed like the house was always full of life, with the laughter and chatter of cousins filling every room. For many of us, it was more than just a place to stay. It was a home, a place where we were cared for, where we could talk and share our dreams and worries. We would sit around the dinner table, sometimes late into the night, just enjoying each other's company, and it was always Aunt Ba who made sure we had everything we needed. As for me, I didn't stay at Aunt Ba's house as often as my cousins. My parents lived only 35 kilometers away, so I could usually return home unless there was bad weather or I was delayed at school. But even though I stayed the least, Aunt Ba's home always felt like my second home, a place where I could find peace and comfort, a place where I knew I was loved unconditionally. Every time I stayed, I was reminded of her incredible generosity, her boundless love, and her selfless spirit. Looking back now, I can see just how much Aunt Ba's support shaped our lives. She wasn't just a relative, she was the glue that held our family together, the one who made sure we never felt alone, no matter how far we were from home. I will forever be grateful for the love she gave us, a love that has left an indelible mark on my heart and my life. Aunt Ba's kindness was a rare gift, something that I know I will never find again in the same way. It wasn't just her generosity that made her so special. It was her unwavering belief in us, her constant encouragement, and the way she made us feel like we were worthy of every opportunity, no matter how hard life got. She wasn't just helping us, she was empowering us to be better, to dream bigger, and to live our lives with purpose. The impact she had on my life, and the lives of so many others, is something that I will carry with me always. While staying with Aunt Ba, I can honestly say that it was one of the most heartwarming and memorable periods of my life. Aunt Ba and her husband treated us with such genuine kindness and affection, as though we were their children. They didn't just offer us a place to stay, they gave us their hearts. In their home, there was always an abundance of food, a kindness so rare that even as a child, I could feel how special it was. Every single meal was a feast in its own right. Meat, soup, and freshly steamed rice, without fail. The meals at Aunt Ba's house were always so generous that it felt as though she were preparing for a grand celebration every day. I remember how we would gather around the table, our faces lighting up as the steaming dishes filled with savory meats were placed before us. It wasn't just food, it was love, comfort, and care all rolled into one. I can't forget a particularly funny story involving my cousin from Aunt Hi's side. He would always tell us how, back home or at school, he was perfectly satisfied with just one bowl of rice. But whenever he came to Aunt Ba's, no matter how full he was after the first bowl, he'd always ask for a second. Yet even after devouring 2 bowls of rice, he would still feel hungry, and we would all laugh at him. "You must love Aunt Ba's meat dishes," we would tease him. And honestly, who could blame him? Aunt Ba had this magical way of making meat taste so incredibly delicious. Every dish she made was generously loaded with tender, flavorful meat. It wasn't just ordinary meat. She knew how to season and cook it in a way that made every bite so satisfying, every mouthful so comforting. It was the kind of meal that made you feel both full and happy, the kind of food that sticks with you long after the meal is over. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Aunt Ba's generosity was not just limited to the quantity of food, but also to the care with which she prepared each meal. I remember how she would insist that we eat more, telling us, "You're too thin, eat more so you grow up strong." It wasn't just about feeding us, it was about making sure we felt loved and cared for. And when we stayed with her, no matter how long or how often, we never once felt like we were a burden. It was always a joy for her to have us around, and that joy was evident in every meal she served, in the way she watched us eat with pleasure, and in the way she took care of every little detail, from the taste of the food to the warmth of the house. I remember my cousin, who especially loved meat, would sometimes stretch his stay an extra day or 2, even when he could have gone back home for the holidays. It wasn't because he didn't want to see his family. It was because he simply couldn't resist the mouth-watering meat dishes that Aunt Ba prepared. He knew that at home, the meals wouldn't be the same. At Aunt Ba's, it was like every day was a special occasion, with steaming pots of braised pork, crispy fried chicken, and beef stew that had been simmered for hours until it was perfectly tender. She made sure we were never without, ensuring we were all well-fed and content. But there was something even more remarkable about Aunt Ba. Despite all her kindness, despite the sacrifices she made for us, she never once asked for anything in return. There were times when my father, recognizing how much Aunt Ba had done for us, tried to offer her money to help with the cost of groceries or the expenses of feeding us all. Every time, Aunt Ba would smile and gently refuse. "No, I don't need anything," she would say, her voice soft but firm. "You're my family. It's my joy to take care of you." Her selflessness was unparalleled. She never expected us to repay her in any way, never asked for recognition or thanks. She just wanted to give us what she had, and that was enough for her. As I grew older, however, I began to realize that Aunt Ba's kindness was not something that was always reciprocated. Very few people, aside from me, ever seemed to acknowledge the sacrifices she had made for all of us. My cousins, many of whom I had grown up with, and even some of the relatives from Aunt Hi's side, hardly ever visited her. It broke my heart to see how easily people seemed to forget the kindness of others once they had moved on in life. Aunt Ba's love, her hospitality, her unwavering generosity, these things were never repaid. There were no visits, no phone calls, no small tokens of appreciation. Take my cousin from Uncle's side, for instance. He now has a well-established career, a stable job, and a comfortable life. But in all the years since he started working, he has never visited Aunt Ba. Not once. Even though Aunt Ba had treated him like a son, fed him, cared for him, and made him feel welcome in her home, he never found the time to show any gratitude. And it's not like he couldn't. He could have easily made the time to stop by, to show his appreciation, but he didn't. It made me wonder, how could someone so successful, someone who had benefited so much from her care, so easily forget all that Aunt Ba had done for him? How could he not take a moment out of his busy life to express gratitude for the woman who had given him so much? Then there are my cousins from Aunt Hai's side. One of them works as a team leader at a factory, and the other, together with his wife, runs a successful roasting shop. They both live so close to Aunt Ba, only 17 kilometers and 8 to 9 kilometers away. And yet, they hardly ever visit her. The older cousin has a stable job, and the younger cousin has his own thriving business. They both live within a short distance from Aunt Ba's house, yet they rarely make the effort to stop by. Pains me to think about it. How easily people can forget. The younger cousin, who had eaten the most meat at Aunt Ba's house, now runs his own roasting business. You would think that, at the very least, he would think to bring Aunt Ba a roast goose, or some small gesture of thanks to show how much he appreciated her. But no, he never did. This indifference, this forgetfulness, breaks my heart. Aunt Ba had given so much, and yet it seemed that few people remembered her kindness once they had moved on. It's not just about material gifts or money. It's the simple act of remembering, of showing appreciation. Yet I've learned that it's often the quietest, most selfless people who end up being forgotten. And while I can't change how others behave, I can choose to honor Aunt Ba's memory by never forgetting her generosity. I carry her kindness in my heart, and I will always remember the warmth of her home, the love she poured into every meal, and the sacrifices she made without ever asking for anything in return. I still remember, as if it happened yesterday, the day Aunt Ba's daughter told me about their trip to visit my younger cousin's roasting shop. It was no small feat for them to make that journey. They had to travel a long distance, spending hours on the road just to reach the shop. The anticipation must have been heavy on Aunt Ba's heart. She hadn't seen her son in so many years. They had hoped to see him, to talk with him, to share a simple family moment. Yet, what they received in return felt so cold and distant. They bought half a roast goose, priced at 220,000 dong, a hefty sum for a family meal, especially considering how inflation has stretched people's finances thin. Yet, despite their efforts, not a single word of gratitude came from my cousin and his wife. They didn't offer any discount, nor did they throw in something extra as a gesture of goodwill, as is often customary between family members. But what truly stung me was that, after so many years, my cousin didn't even ask about Aunt Ba's health or how she was doing. Not a single question about her well-being, not a word of concern. Instead, his conversation was entirely focused on promoting his business. He spoke endlessly about how people could help spread the word about his food. If the food's good, please tell your friends and neighbors. The more customers, the better, he said, as if that was the only thing on his mind. If they order online, we can deliver, but only if the total is enough. His entire presence was saturated with business talk, advertisements, and empty pleasantries, devoid of any real human connection. It was heartbreaking, knowing that Aunt Ba had longed for more than just a transaction, that she had hoped to feel the warmth of family, the love and concern that should come with it. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. I don't visit Aunt Ba as often as I would like to. Life, with all its demands, has kept me away. I left for the provincial city to study, and then later, work called me away, keeping me tied to the city. My visits home are limited to the major holidays, and even then, they are often brief and rushed. It's not that I've forgotten about Aunt Ba, though. Far from it. I don't visit as often as I should, but she has never left my thoughts. Every holiday, when I send gifts or money to my parents, I always make sure to remind them to bring something for Aunt Ba, whether it's a small present or just a token of appreciation. It's the least I can do, considering all that she has done for me and the sacrifices she made for our family when we were younger. Over the past 2 years, my schedule has lightened somewhat, and I've had more time to visit her. Whenever I find myself passing through her district, I make it a point to stop by her house, even if it's just for a short while. I know it means a lot to her, even if she doesn't always say it. I can see the joy in her eyes when I walk through the door, a kind of quiet, unspoken happiness that comes from knowing she is still remembered, still cared for. I wouldn't dare claim to be the most devoted child. I'm not perfect, and I've certainly had my moments of neglect. But I know in my heart that it's not right, the way Aunt Ba has been treated by some. She has always been so kind, so generous, even when she had so little. She gave so much of herself, especially when we were children. She took care of us, comforted us, and loved us as if we were her own. She did all this without ever asking for anything in return. She never kept track of the favors she did for us, nor did she demand repayment. But as we grew up, it seemed like the tides turned, and she was left alone. Life moved on for all of us, but Aunt Ba stayed behind, quietly watching from the sidelines, her life slowly becoming more solitary. She didn't voice her disappointments or complain about the lack of attention. She never once asked for anything. Still, whenever I express my regret, whenever I share these feelings with her, she simply smiles and says, "It's okay, as long as everyone lives well." And in that moment, I know she means it. She truly wants the best for everyone. But I also know that these words are her way of consoling me, of masking the quiet sadness that must surely linger in her heart. I can feel the loneliness in her voice, the way her smile never quite reaches her eyes. It's a sadness she hides behind those words, a longing for the company she once had. Now, with her daughter married and living in another city, Aunt Ba is left all alone. No one to talk to, no one to share her thoughts or feelings with. She is alone with her memories, with time, and with the quiet hum of a life that has become more and more distant from the bustling world outside. I can't help but feel a deep sense of unfairness about it all. She deserves so much more than this. As we reflect on Aunt Ba's story, I hope it has touched your heart as much as it has mine. It reminds us of the importance of family, kindness, and showing gratitude to those who have always been there for us, even when we may take them for granted. We often get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life, but stories like this help us pause and appreciate the people who truly matter. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you've learned from this story that you will bring into your own life? Is there someone in your life, like Aunt Ba, who deserves more of your time and care? Please share your thoughts in the comments below this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more meaningful stories and discussions. Let's keep the conversation going and remind each other of the power of kindness and family. Thank you for watching.